When Maryanne Atkins was 6 years old, her drug addict mother became incarcerated. The child was sent to live with her estranged father, who also had a drug problem. He regularly withheld food and locked Maryanne in her bedroom. Neighbors often complained to the police about her screaming when he beat her. Authorities finally removed Maryanne from the home at the age of 10 and placed her in foster care. But by that time, she was severely traumatized, both physically and emotionally, which negatively affected her behavior.
Like standing on top of a table screaming or stealing other kids' lunch, things that are red flags. And so why didn't foster care work? Number one, the setup she was coming into the system with.
That's Claudia Rowe, a journalist with the Seattle Times and author of Wards of the State, The Long Shadow of American Foster Care. She's reported on juvenile justice, child welfare, and public schools for years, and says that the foster care system doesn't focus on the crucial issue of early emotional bonding.
In my reporting for this book, what I saw again and again as really formative is the system's discouragement of bonds, of bonding, of attachment. It's designed for kids to move around. If they're not going to be adopted by a foster parent, they're going to move to another home. And the foster parent, too, withholds a certain kind of affection. They have to because they know the child will be moving on. Their own heart, right, is at risk. So I certainly talked with foster parents who said, I love the kids, but I have to protect myself. I don't want them to call me mama anymore, call me auntie, just to create that divide for themselves.
Rowe says this lack of emotional attachment means that foster kids don't weather the storms of frustration, humiliation, or impatience that occur in all our lives. They haven't been able to cultivate the emotional reserves necessary to do so. This means that instead of working through these feelings, these kids lash out at whomever or whatever is close by. Maryanne was no exception. Her behavioral outbursts eventually escalated to violence. At age 16, she killed a 21-year-old man and was charged and convicted as an adult. She received a 19-year sentence for the crime. But many experts wonder whether adolescents, whose brains are not yet fully developed and who've dealt with traumatizing events since childhood, should be sentenced as adults.
Everybody is sort of searching for the answer, right? What is the answer? I mean, we vacillate in this country and have for 150 years on rehabilitation versus punishment. And I think the question is, where does that balance land and where does it work? And it depends what you mean by work, right? It depends what your goal is.
And the stakes are high for juvenile offenders. Is a young person's life worth rehabilitating? This is a question that lawmakers in 6 states, California, Montana, Oregon, Wisconsin, Washington, and Utah, say the answer is yes. Legislators in these states have ruled that minors who commit violent crimes, even murder, will not head to adult jail. Instead, these young offenders are placed in juvenile rehabilitation centers until they reach 24 years of age, or, as in the cases of Washington State and Utah, 25. During this period, they'll receive regular therapy and higher education opportunities. Maryanne was one of the first benefactors of this new law when it was passed in Washington State back in 2018. Rowe says that after 4 years in juvenile rehabilitation at Echo Glen Children's Center, Maryanne's transformation was profound.
More thoughtful, less withheld and guarded, less constantly angry. She could laugh. She could express herself. And I think most important, she could express herself with words. She could advocate for herself and for other foster youth, speaking to lawmakers. This was so radically different from the red-faced, sobbing, gasping girl who I saw in court.
Rowe attributes that transformation to the long-term stability and safety Maryanne experienced for the first time in her life.
This time at Echo Glen was really the only point in her life where she was safe, where she knew she was safe, where she would be fed. She knew she was not going to be cold and on the street and potentially at somebody's mercy.
During those 4 years, Maryanne had one case manager. In foster care, however, caseworkers, social workers, foster parents, and psychologists rotated out of her life without warning. But that stability ended when Maryanne aged out of juvenile rehabilitation at age 25 and was sent to adult prison.
Seems like maybe all the growth that you've enabled through juvenile rehabilitation is going to be erased when you just send these people right back into prison. This law is fairly new and it's been a quite rocky rollout. And I would say that there's a lot of adjusting going on now. So that question, does this make sense to provide for people who are going back into prison? That question is definitely in the air. When I asked this question of the authorities, I would hear all the time, well, the tools that a young person gets in juvenile rehabilitation will make their time in prison better.
She says Maryanne isn't doing well in adult prison, but that she's holding on as best she can. But so are the victim's family, who miss the loved one she killed.
The experience of a victim's family, in this case, their wound, cannot be forgotten or minimized. Does taking away a young person's life satisfy that wound? I think it's a little early to say in the case of Maryanne and her victim's family.
But Rowe has reported on other teen homicide cases and has been moved by victims' families who would choose rehabilitation for the adolescent offender over adult prison.
I'm thinking of this one mom in particular. Her daughter was 14. Her daughter's killer was 13. He got an adult sentence in the 1990s during the super predator era. He went away for 20 years. And I went back to that girl's mom, and she was broken by the whole thing, including that. She didn't want that kid's life to be taken away at 20 years in prison. He didn't come out till he's in his mid-30s. She didn't feel good about that either. We are all sort of groping our way toward a better answer.
What does seem to be working in the youth rehabilitation program are smaller facilities that operate more like secure group homes and house 20 to 30 youth.
We need something for this sort of emerging adult age, that 18 to 25-year-old zone where brains are still forming, change is still possible, and you don't want to lock in really sort of antisocial behaviors by sending that young person into an adult prison environment where all they are doing is sort of bulking up in defense. We are not there. I will tell you, we are working toward a solution as a country. We are not there.
Claudia Rowe's book, Wards of the State, The Long Shadow of American Foster Care, is available now online and can be requested through your local bookstore. To find out more about our guests this week, visit viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. This segment is sponsored by Capital One. Banking with Capital One helps you keep more money in your wallet with no fees or minimums on checking accounts and no overdraft fees. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC.